I'd like to welcome everyone to our speaker program today. Our topic is Japan's role in Asian regional security. And our speaker is a renowned expert on Japanese national security policy, Nobukatsu Kanehara, who is a professor in the Department of Political Science at Doshisha University in Kyoto, Japan. I'm Bruce Aronson, a senior advisor to the Japan Center of the U.S. Asia Law Institute and an adjunct professor at NYU School of Law. I'll be the moderator today. Before we begin, I have a couple of brief administrative announcements about programs for next week. This coming Tuesday, February 28th, we'll have an evening program via Zoom only. The title is The Administrative Foundations of the Chinese Fiscal State. Wei Sui, professor of law and tax expert at the University of British Columbia, will share highlights from his recent book, in which he introduces the politics, policies, and practices of tax collection in China. NYU law professor Mitchell Kane, who is the editor-in-chief of the Tax Law Review, will be the moderator. Next week on Thursday, March 2nd, we're doing the opposite. We have an in-person only event right here in Vanderbilt Hall. In fact, in room 201 from 12:30 to 2 p.m. The topic for that event will be hidden transcripts, reflections from a Hong Kong campus. Elena He, who's an associate professor of history at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, will reflect on the events in Hong Kong from 2019 to 2022, using narrative accounts drawn from her interactions with Hong Kong and mainland Chinese students in the territory. Catherine Wilhelm, our executive director at the U.S. Asia Law Institute and an adjunct professor at NYU School of Law, will be the moderator. Let's move on to today's program. Let me briefly introduce our speaker. As I mentioned, Professor Kanehara is currently at Doshisha University. Before that, he played a prominent role in the Japanese cabinet on national security issues, including acting as Assistant Chief Cabinet Secretary during the Abe administration, starting in 2012, and the first Deputy Secretary General of the National Security Secretariat, which was formed in 2013. Both of these positions lasted until 2019, essentially the entire term of the Abe administration. In addition, Professor Kanehara was the Deputy Director of the Cabinet Intelligence and Research Office. Prior to that, he had a long and prominent career in Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Among many distinguished or notable positions, he was ambassador in charge of the United Nations Human Rights and served abroad as Deputy Chief of Mission in Korea, and also as political minister at the Japanese U.S. Embassy in Washington. We are very pleased to welcome Professor Kanehara to join us today. As we all know, Japan's national security policy has been thrown open to new debate following Russia's invasion of Ukraine and ongoing concern about regional pressures from China. And last December, Japan's national security strategy and two related policies were reviewed and amended for the first time since the enactment in 2013. So it is very timely to hear from Professor Kanehara about the results of this national security review, the new policies, and his comprehensive view of Japan's national security from a geopolitical perspective. Well, let's begin. Professor Kanehara, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to make 3 points. One is the liberal influence or the deep state. Second is what spoke with Russian in Ukraine. This what spoke with Russia. In particular, information. Liberal international order is a new order. We have this only towards the end of the 20th century. We have to go through many of that. There are two big wars in the former half of the 20th century, millions of years for that. Can't remember the names, right? It's just gone in the dark. Without being remembered, we have dictatorship, communist, Nazi, or fascist. We have the very strong military that to do with Japan for almost 15 years. They broke the Japanese empire in the end. But after that, the colonial rules, racial discriminations. 20th century was not a very good century for the humanity, but we brought down one by one these difficult things, right? Indians, communist bloc collapsed. For that, the racial discriminations ended by apartheid fell. We have to remember forever Reverend King's name. His name must be remembered by many Asian Africans. And Gandhi, they pulled down the colonial rules and the racial discrimination. This ended towards the end of the last century and communist bloc collapsed. Now we have this one. And everybody is equal, regardless of anything, sex, skin color, ethnic background, or cultural breeds. Everybody has conscience. It's absolutely equal. And through conscience, we can know what love is. And love is fundamental ethical emotions for the Christians. But other civilizations call it with different names. Confucians call it Ren in Chinese, it's Jin in Japanese, in Korean, and Buddhists say compassion, and Muslims say brotherhood. But we are talking about the same thing. And because of this, we can make a society an inclusive one, right? And we can work together, and self-realization is a freedom. People want to do what they want to do, but it's not for his own egoistic desire, right? Drinking good whiskey and these things is not this is not purpose of life. Purpose of life is to contribute to society, right? This is self-realization. And this is where we are, and this system is precious, and Japan believes that we can enhance the most our interest in this liberal system. So we have to defend this. Big shock was Ukraine. Putin just invaded Ukraine. 2014, we're not prepared. I was in the National Security Council, Japan. NATO didn't move even a finger. Putin had his own desire realized. And the cyber attack, a little green man with strange green mask, and they can go for the, weapons that they came to. They captured the Crimea overnight. Brilliant military operation. And he took it for granted. And before his elections next year, 2024, Putin might have thought, I need a big event. Okay, elections, this is a fake election, right? You can't have a thin majority. You have to be huge majority. So Putin needed some big events. And he thought the second phase of Ukraine invasion must be not only on Donbass, must be on total Ukraine. Big mistake. This time, Ukraine, Americans, NATO members were prepared. Cyber attack didn't function at all. They paralyzed the telecommunications. Elon Musk came in. SpaceX, the pizza rack, antenna was okay. You can communicate with everybody. That shattered the ambition of Putin. And the little green man, I think they're all killed in Kiev. And tanks came down from Belarus, was destroyed by the javelin, the Ukrainian by Bayraktar, that's Turkish drone, and they withdrew. Now they are fighting here. It's a very big fight. In spring, Russians are here. The Ukrainians are the Ukrainians. The very big message that we showed, the Westerners showed in this fight is when the West is united, we can still maintain the peace and stability. Before that, Putin, Xi Jinping might have thought, can I say this? President Trump shattered the unity of the West. Hence, Great Britain jumped up in EU, and we are very shaky. And the dictators thought the West is over, West is in decline, and now some new chaos is coming up, dark age. It's not the case. When the West is united, we can keep our liberal system, and we can still maintain peace and security on a global scale. And let me touch upon China. Putin is a big loser. He can never come back. He will be remembered like Hitler, 21st century. He was so many massively innocent Ukrainians. And he is a big loser. He pushed away Finland and Sweden to NATO. And Ukraine is not determined to go to the West. And the gas oil market is shut against Russian gas and oil. They have to sell the gas and oil to Indians or Chinese with a very much discount. This is where they are. Putin is now ending. I don't believe that peace movement will remove Putin, that this will never happen in Kremlin. But inside Kremlin, somebody could start saying, sir, you cannot win this war. Step down. you are too weak to do the question. This could start. So anyway, two things now ended. We have to end this war with the victory of Ukraine. And as Mr. Biden said, we have to be there as far as they can. When the two sides are exhausted, again, the stalemate will come in. I don't know if this could be a cruel result for Zelensky, but when they can no longer fight, this is the end of the war. But until that moment, we have to help them. And the next China. China is rising, and we thought they were okay. See, in Tiananmen, when Soviet Union collapsed, right? And just before that, Tiananmen happened. And we were helping Deng Xiaoping a lot. Mao died in 1976, and then came in, and he was opening up China. And he picked up Hu Yaobao and Ming, two reformers. Our Prime Minister was a bit proud of Mr. Hu Yaobao. They are talking about the democracy in China. We opened up all the diplomatic archives in Tokyo. You can check it. They were talking about democracy in China. But when Soviet Union collapsed, almost on the verge of the collapse, Deng Xiaoping, I believe, was heavily criticized by the linguistic leftists in Beijing. So unfortunately, he cut off Hu Yaobao and Jiang Zemin. Hu Yaobao was very angry. He is a very honest man. He was shouting in the Politburo, and he got heart attack and he died there. And then to mourn him, students, kids gathered in Tiananmen. Government will not spare. Government does not fear students. Oh, the governments do not fear students because they go home when they're hungry, usually. But at that time, Soviets were Romania, Hungary, all the nations were holding in Eastern Europe. It's overreacted, the PLA. They massacred the kids. This is Tiananmen, June 4th, 1989. Only Japan stood by them. We said, now if we put sanctions upon China, they'll go back to Mao's time. We can't do that. We have to help Deng Xiaoping. He's struggling to open up China. And we did. And after 30 years, we thought China would be like us one day. But the determination of communist leadership was different. They needed our money, our technology to keep communist dictatorship in power. We believe that they will change like us. After this very nationalistic phase, they'll soften up. This did not happen. Unfortunately, Xi Jinping is the generation of Red Guard generation. That it is not his fault, but Mao destroyed their education system for 10 years, from 66 to 76. He has absolutely no idea what we are talking about. Liberalism, liberal order. He doesn't understand that. The world is such a wonderful kind of simply. And we remember what China was. That's Japan. And this is now Chinese day to hail. This is where they are. And Chinese people are different, we believe. We saw they evolve. A lot of Chinese are very different. Yes, and I'm teaching Chinese kids in universities. They're very different. They're just like Japanese. But Xi Jinping is very much old-fashioned. We have been facing for some time. How to engage China? I believe that we can do that. The integrated deterrence proposed by President Biden, the Democrats, Mr. Blinken, this is right approach. This is very similar to our approach. We cannot talk about only military side or decoupling side. We of course we have talked about that. Security of Taiwan, peace, stability in the region, and the chip industries decoupling. We have to do that, but we have huge amount of trade going on. Many companies are operating in China. Tesla, Apple, all of that. Everybody's industry in China. As far as they grow, they stay there. And we have talked about climate change. They are the greatest polluter of the planet. You two have to talk with each other. And this is something we have to do. Value paths are very difficult to talk with. Xi Jinping prohibited several words in their press: democracy, freedom, and rule of law, and liberal order, universal values. They can't talk about this. So it's very difficult to engage Xi Jinping now, but we have to wait until he's out. It will take maybe 5 months. But this is our approach. And we have to engage Chinese. We can do this. This year, China finally started to shrink in terms of population. We did several years ago. Japan is now shrinking. We are losing 400,000 Japanese every year. It's just like medium-sized cities evaporating every year. I was in Philadelphia. It's 1 million. So in 2 years, one Philadelphia evaporates in Japan. This is our situation. We are now accepting foreign workers. 80,000 before COVID every year, foreign workers. They're expanding still 2.5 million people working in Japan foreigners. In European countries, in Germany, for example, it's 10 million, still small, but we have to expand our foreign workers. We have to change the foreign workers policy. But China started to shrink now. They had 20 million babies last several years ago. They have now only 10 million babies. And now they're peaking out in this way. Japan did several years ago. China is reaching the size of the US, but they will peak out here. They can never reach the size of Old West. Old West is twice as big as China. They can never reach our size. As far as the West is united, not only economic power, the comprehensive power, military, technology, values, narratives. West is far stronger than China. So as far as we're united, we can engage China so that they will not derail from the right path. And this is something we have to do. Let me touch upon Taiwan. Taiwan is a big island. Hong Kong is better known than Taiwan because Hong Kong was British colony. Taiwan was Japan's colony. But nobody can say we can surrender Australia to Taiwan, to Beijing, right? But what's the difference between Taiwan and Australia? Surface? Yes, Taiwan is much tinier. Population, 23 million, the same. GDP, one-tenth of Japan, 10% of Japan, the same size. Taiwan, the same size as a nation, as Australia. We can never surrender them. And they democratized in 1996 under Lee Kuan-yew. So sheer democracy is not experimental. This is a true, pure democracy. And if we surrender Taiwan to Beijing, nobody will buy our credibility. People will say, Westerners fight for Ukraine, they abandon Hong Kong, they abandon Myanmar, they abandon Taiwan. They will say that. So we have to show our credibility. We cannot let Taiwan surrender to China. And we can do this simply because, as I said, Western whole power, comprehensive power is far bigger than China. We can dissuade them, don't do the stupid things. And what we agreed with China in 1972 is this. Okay, there's only one China. But truth is there are two Chinas, Taiwan and continent, right? Two Chinas. But both of them said there's only one China. So we said, okay, it's one China. It's fine. And now we changed the visiting government from Taipei to Beijing. UK UK recognized Beijing from the beginning. They have Hong Kong. They have spoken with China. We changed the government. So we said that Beijing is not legitimate government to represent China. That's fine. And this is one China. That's fine. But we never agreed that Beijing could conquer Taipei by force. Truth is, there are two Chinas. And this peace over Taipei, peace over the Strait is a precondition. Then we can live with the fiction, one China, government, Beijing, that's fine. But do not conquer Taiwan by force. You have to talk to each other. If Taiwan goes to Beijing peacefully, we don't complain. Maybe that is a day when China is a democracy. DDP can have seats in the Chinese Congress. But until that moment, we cannot agree that they take over Taiwan by force. But we have to show our resilience. China can be persuaded only when they calculate many things, money, business, and post-war economic sanctions by the West, possibility of the victory. And we have to make their calculations clear. They can't win. They can very well start a war, but they can never win. We have to show that to them. We don't agree with the independence of Taiwan. We are sympathetic with their passion for self-determination, but simply it's too risky. That could invite war. That's something we have to say to Taiwanese. At the same time, we have to say to the Chinese, we don't want to war over Taiwan Strait. Okay, 15 minutes, I gave.
Perfect. Thank you for your opening remarks. I think it raises many questions. First one, I suppose, would be, what do you view as sort of the main changes or highlights? Last December, we know that Japan substantially revised for the first time its national security strategy, identifying countries which were considered to be the big challenges and changing several doctrines. What would you have us think about as sort of the highlights of the change in Japanese national security policy in the last 6 months or a year?
After Japan took the side of the West under Prime Minister Yoshida and Kishi, we had huge repercussion from the leftist side. And until Nakasone, nobody talked about national security balance. Dr. Kissinger wrote in his book, World Order, he wrote, Japan was in theory in the West, but they were not. This is what he wrote. He's so right. Japan thought we're neutral. Nakasone said after Afghan invasion, we're in the West. He was heavily criticized by the leftists. When the Cold War is over, socialists just melted down. Then we started to be a bit more realistic. But while the parliament was divided heavily between the socialist communist camp and LDP, they have absolutely no common ground for national security. We had security strategy, but we couldn't say that. We couldn't persuade our staunch communists and socialists. Now they're gone almost. It's time to explain fully what our national strategy is. It was 2013, first national security strategy written by Abe-san. And now this is the second time. So for the first time, we're saying our thinking. It was there, but we never explained to our people. We said our challenge, but we are in the liberal order, but you have to maintain this. So we have to go with the Americans and Europeans. And here in the region, we need Koreans, ASEAN nations, and Australia and New Zealand. Now we have to pull in Indians. And this is basic strategy. The concerns are in Russia. They are fighting a war there. And North Korea developing nuclear, right? And China is a strategic challenge for us, for everybody. We said this clearly. And how to cope with that? As I said in my previous speech, as far as the West is united, we can cope with this. China, North Korea, and Russia. This is the national strategy. We explained this for the first time. And second is, now Taiwan is a big issue for us. We didn't fear very much Russians because Russian war is a European war. NATO is very strong. Huge amount of nuclear weapons overactive. Actually, it's very relaxed. North Korea, there might be a second Korean war, but South Korea is a very big nation. They can fight back very well. Nuclear missiles are a big concern for us, but it will be okay. China is very different. When they invade Taiwan, we'll be involved immediately. And Americans will start bombarding Chinese vessels from our bases in Japan. So this is our war. Suddenly it came to us. It was taboo for a long time. Under President Obama, it was not discussed at all. And under President Trump, it came up. Mr. Pompeo said in Los Angeles, clearly 2020, our engagement policy failed. Now we have to be prepared. But Mr. Trump is so transactional. so we didn't know in the end. But now Mr. Biden came in, he invited Suga-san, and they started to talk about Taiwan contingency. We did this, the last time was 1969. between Kissinger and between Nixon and Sato. 50 years we didn't talk about that. Suddenly it was open again. And this is a huge shock for the Japanese. Now Taiwan is every day on TV. Even comedians are talking about Taiwan these days. And then when we think back, Japanese domestic politics very heavily torn between the leftists very close to Moscow, governments and the LDP very close to Washington. We could not build up our self-defense forces. And we kept our forces quite at low level, 1% GNP. Still, 250,000 forces and 5 trillion yen budget in the size of UK, France, and Germany. It is not very small. It's small in Asia. It's not small in Europe. But when we see China growing in this way, 10 years ago, China was our size. We didn't fear them. They talk about Taiwan, we said, but you can do it. Today we say they can start. They cannot be successful, but they can start this. And Americans are thinking in the same way. Suddenly we thought we are too small. We have to do something. And the military budget will be doubled. If we double military budget, we'll be number 3, only after US, China, and Japan, and then Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, UK, France, Germany. We go up here, still smaller than Chinese one, but we have to do something. Otherwise, Chinese aggression. Now the discussion is who pays?
That was my next question.
And the truth is, our national debt is not created by the defense. It's created by the pension and Medicare. Huge amount of money is going out to the government. When the economy is rising, it's Medicare. But now after the national failed to protect that member society, Americans went up, but we went down. So the gap of revenue, expenditure is widening in this way. And my government, Japan's parliament, in particular, parliament is born against the king, right? Parliament said, don't waste our tax money. Our parliament is born after major restoration. We are born together with the government. Happy to waste money. Our parliament has absolutely no sense of economics. They're happy to spend money. And for spending money, who should pay for that? We have 3 taxes, major ones: consumption tax, corporation tax, and income tax. Otherwise, we can print money or borrow money from the people. Consumption tax, pensioners complain a lot. Because its price goes up, pension is the same, we complain about, right? Income tax, salaryman like us, we're totally transparent. Government grabs money from us. And salarymen are very angry, right? And corporation tax, the small and medium-sized enterprises are the main supporters of the LDP. They complain a lot. So LDP is quite hesitant to do this. And then the borrowing money, who pays? Kids. They don't vote now, so let's borrow money from them. This is my government's policy for a long time. Now the debt is $10 trillion. $10 trillion, 2 years GDP for Japan. Shall we continue this or not? And Kishida-san was brave enough to say, now we have to raise tax. Actual working people must pay the defense. We don't borrow money for the future, from the future generation. We can't do that. Now Kishida-san is broken down, but he's surviving. I believe that the large Japanese population is quite the same. LDP members are different. They have local election this year. That's the reason why they are shouting. But the Japanese are saying, we can't borrow money forever from the future generations. We have to do something here. I believe that they're going to pay tax in the end.
Well, certainly that's an issue which all societies, including the US, faces as well. Defense budget and social welfare spending keeps going up. And at the same time, we express all the concerns about debt, amount of debt and debt limits. And not too many ideas of ways to deal with both of those issues at the same time that could win popular political support. So that's certainly not confined to Japan.
But US was successful in breaking a new terrain for new technology, internet. GAFA appeared. Japan failed. Europe failed. China is catching up. They have different reasons for thinking that super surveillance country they needed. But the only way for survival in the competition in the free market is to have ingenuity, to break new terrain with new technology. Japan lost this scheme. We have to change our society. We have these people, the founders of Sony, Toyota, Panasonic, they were like this. They're working very hard from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. to make Japanese people happier, right? We don't have these truly talented with ingenuity people. We have to have we have these people. We don't give them chances, that misters. Otherwise, the family will fall. We have to stop it.
Going back to the question of kind of partnerships for Japan on the national security front. So with this change in situation and change in Japan's policies, has the U.S.-Japan security relationship changed in a qualitative way? Is it different than it was 5 years ago?
It's changing a lot. It's changing a lot. When Japan lost the war, Americans came into Japanese imperial shoes. They took over responsibility to defend the peninsula, Taiwan Islands, and the ex-colonial Philippines. And Japan agreed to help U.S. forces by letting Japanese bases be used by the Americans. That agreement in 1960. And when the Cold War is over, when the North Koreans started to develop nuclear weapons, Americans came to us and said, we might have a war again. They said, would you help us? We said, Prime Minister Obuchi and the president was Mr. Clinton. Obuchi was called in the United States, but he's a very hot man. He said, okay, we're going to help Americans in the peninsula, but not in the combat operation, non-combat operations. We can't help Americans. This is agreement of Clinton, Obuchi made a new law for that. And then the 9/11 came. New York Twin Towers are destroyed, right? And NATO galvanized. NATO, we got active fire. They started the war in Afghanistan. Koizumi was in that said, why don't we do anything here? And he ordered our fleets, the Navy, to jump in the Indian Ocean. They were attacking for Taliban with bombers and right. We couldn't do that. We of that. So first they replenished the oil with warships of the allies. It's not only American, but it's not. And this is a big change for us. And then the Abe-san came in and he said, China grows and Taiwan is an issue. And Abe-san said, it's better to say from the beginning, we will jump in the war, not only in the non-combat operations, combat operations. Please have a deterrence. That's Abe's decision, 2015. So it's working very fast. But the last part is, in theory, we're now with constitutional interpretation changes these things. In theory, we're ready. But truth is, are you capable? This was a big question mark. And Kishida stood up. He said, I'm going to implement the will of Abe. We have to be careful. That's the reason why we have to double the defense budget. But this is where we are. We're changing a lot. Now we have to truly talk about in depth how to deter China and dissuade them. How to be really potential. Big part is okay. We didn't have anything. It's offensive. Chinese, North Koreans, Russian, Taiwanese, South Koreans, 2001, right? And we had only 200 kilometers. So everybody is moving this way, such this way. We said, we can't do this any longer. We can't do this any longer. Abe-san started to buy 1,000 kilometer missiles. compared to soil. Now, Kishida-san says, to detect China, 50 tomahawks, 500 tomahawks, nothing. They have 2,000 missiles to attack Japan. When we say, if you shoot me, I shoot you back, we have to have the same number. So this is what we are not talking about. We have to truly deter China. We can't address everything. That's it. But for the conventional missiles, for the conventional forces, we should be able to shoot China. We cannot be defeated easily. It's
So how about apart from the US? And one thing that we've all been noticing the last few years is Japan is reaching out and making new partnerships, access agreements with Australia, recently the UK, very recently, Green Cooperation for Clean Stuff. Well, how do you envision all this ending up? About a month ago, we have on our website, you have an essay series, it's called Perspectives over 2 weeks or so, and one of the authors said, maybe it's time for a Pacific neighbor. Not today or tomorrow, but what do you see a long-term goal for all these different relationships partnering in US and Japan?
the NATO is very strong, a single enemy, and one for all for one, act. Small nations together as in object. This is NATO. Stronger. Georgia. The American Pacific alliance system is far weaker. Japan, US, and then US, ROK, and US, Philippines, and Australia, Thailand. Australia is okay. They come together always, but they're far away. Korea, Japanese have it's a difficult sister-brother relationship. And South Koreans are okay with North Korea. Yeah, fully engaged. But when we talk about Taiwan, they hesitate. They don't want to provoke Taiwan. So it's only us in Taiwan and Australia. It's too weak. Too weak. The first target was India. Indians were close to Moscow simply because we took hands with Mao. Mao invaded India. He was very angry in 1962. But they thought they are democracy, but we have Mao. Very angry. They went to Moscow to buy weapons. Now Russia is falling very. China is right. Pointing out. India, they cannot say bye to Russia, but they need Russia to counter China. But they are slowly coming towards us. Abe said, jump in. The elephant is too heavy to jump, but they are coming. We need Indians as a strategic partner, and then we have to develop ties with major European nations. Industrially, UK. It's just like playing we feel. And we're very happy to see AUKUS, UK, Australia, and the United States in the Pacific region. Without NATO, we're very fragile. So we have to act one by one, piece by piece. India, ASEAN nations are totally it's 10 nations, very different nations. Indonesia and Philippines and Malaysia and Vietnam, these coastal nations of South China Sea, they're very worried about Chinese expansion. We can talk to them. Thailand is an ally of the United States, but they don't see China as a true threat because they're far away, right? Cambodia, they are receiving huge amount of money from China. It's very difficult for them to say Chinese. Brunei, heavily invested by the Western nations, but unfortunately, their oil resources are inside their dotted line of China. So Brunei cannot say no to China. So Laos is too close to China, but their ears is pulled by Vietnam, so they're in between Laos. And Myanmar is really difficult. They delayed from the world. Can't go along with them, so they go close to China. And this is ASEAN. So ASEAN is not one voice organization, but one by one we have to take them. Right? India. So Europe, part of ASEAN, Australia. We wish very much to engage Korea. Korea is a huge. 1/4 of Japan's size, 50 million population of 600,000 farmers. It is expanding greatly. And then when I say, excuse me, sir, why don't you look down? They say, no, no, no. They look only look at China Korea is now a global Korea. And we have to engage them somehow. Then we could be okay to dissuade China from doing ventures in. Sorry.
So going back to China just for a moment, many of our people in our audience are more familiar with China than Japan. Is it practical to economically disengage from China? In the US, we seem to have, at least publicly or politically, competition to see who can counter China war. My sense is that in Japan and other Asian countries, all of whom have China as their largest trading partner, it's not just a question of supply chains, but a question of selling to the Chinese market. That's important. So is there some difference in the kind of public debate on that kind of issue in Japan and the US?
My sense is US is more inclined to talk about decoupling. But the truth is, if you see the numbers, right, the decoupled part is very limited. Market is run on the logic of the free market. The one who produces the best things at cheapest price is a winner. And this is for everybody. China has but market distorting practices. Of course, they are paying a lot of money for the nationalized companies. They are doing some bad things, but their labor force is huge and cheap and very well skilled. And many companies are there. Elon Musk's, Tesla, Apple, Toyota. And as far as they grow, they don't have national security. I think, of course, the national power itself is security, but national security. This is the domain where different logic applies. This is not market logic. This is national security logic. Your chips can kill my boys. Don't do it. This is very different. We have to go along. Because we are very much dependent upon US for national security. And now US is cutting off China from the best chip producing capabilities. TSMC Taiwan is invited to Arizona, right? We invite them to Kumamoto. The Germans are inviting them, right? And maybe 7 nanos. This is the war. Beyond that, it's military capable. Americans are cutting off China. Yeah. When China is making their own network, they are very good engineers. That we can't do anything for that. China can do that themselves, but we don't help them. This is a new world. And the Americans decided this last October, right? And the Dutch followed, and Japan followed, and British followed. If these 4 follows, we can pick up the Chinese chips industry. And China was feared for 5G world, right? They can dominate 5G in the global market. Now, Huawei's 5G business is zero, collapsed. Huawei iPhone and the smartphone Huawei zero because of this. But this is not for beating Huawei in the free market. This is not. This is simply the result of national security. And this part is inevitable. We have to do this. But large part, 90%, is not decoupled. For example, Toyota, main companies, they have factories in China. It's stupid to make cars in the United States and bring them across a huge Pacific and sell it. It's much more expensive than Chinese cars. You can't compete. You make cars in there and then sell them. As far as their market goes, bigger and bigger, it's profitable. And nobody stopped them because it does not touch them. Have a bad effect.
Well, one final question from me before we turn it over to the audience. At least in Japan, people have been noting that now that Japan is the head of the G7 this year, that Prime Minister Kishida is the only leader in the G7 who has not yet visited Ukraine. I'm not sure what to make of that. Is that really important?
Yes, yes, yes. Now, for us, Ukraine was, I think I don't know, I'm not in the government, so I see only papers, but the Kishida-san prepared 50, 500 billion yen. That's $50 billion, right? $1 billion budget for helping Ukraine. It's huge amount of money for us, huge amount of money. And he was preparing for that, and he's looking at the opportunity to Ukraine, but President Biden went there at the big shop for Japanese power. He took everything. They're waiting now. It's important for him, but simply because it is first time that the Japanese are reacting so passionately against the justice struggle in Europe. Japanese didn't pay much attention to the First World War, in the Second World War, in Meiji, these things. But now Japanese are reacting to Ukraine situation. It's every day on TV. And some Ukrainians are in Japan, because we have many subsidiaries in Ukraine. They're good engineers. They have their branches in Ukraine. They can become countries. They are living in Japan. And Ukraine, each other in the Ukraine embassy. And for Kishida-san, this is important. For Japan, this is important simply because the Europe and Far East should react to injustice inside this continent. We are not separated. We should react together. US is looking from the other side, both sides, right? During the Cold War, the Far East and Europe was cut off. Was too busy with their own theater. Now we have to have a common picture. Putin is bad, she is bad. We have to cooperate. To show that, we have to show our assistance to Ukraine. So I think Kishida-san was preparing a huge amount of money, but we'll have diet session. Japanese diet is crazy diet, said like crazy diet. They became prime minister for 200 hours per year. Amazing, isn't it? President doesn't go to Congress 200 hours, right? Our parliament retained prime minister for said meticulous questions. They have asked us for bureaucrats, but he's prime minister every day. It's completely unproductive, but they do this for centuries and they can't stop it. Now Kishida-san could not find a time slot with Ukraine. And he lost opportunity. And Mr. Biden-Kishida. This is what happened.
Well, thank you. Let's open it up to the audience for questions. We have some questions here. Okay, Jose, please.
So in the past few days, we've had Biden, as well as his Secretary of State, hint that China might actually give weapons to Russia. From your point of view, what changes that would?
China and Russia do not like each other. They have to gangster families in Europe. But if Russia is it's not good for China. China has to face this alone. So they're loving each other, but they love them. So now Russia is in very difficult. They never win Putin. NATO is far stronger simply because they don't provide personnel. Depends upon the number of fighters in Ukraine. That's the fate is decided by them. As far as Ukraine fights, the Westerners help them, and Putin can never win this war. And if the stalemate is frozen, it's okay for China. But if Putin is defeated totally, that for China, they have to help China. China will help Russia to some extent, but China does not want to get attention of Washington, but you are helping the Russians. So they want to do this in a very modest way, in a moderate way, to help Russia to some extent. But China will say, don't blame me. I'm just doing the minimum. We don't want to invite American sanctions upon China. That's them. They are just measuring the distance between Moscow and Washington.
Tom O'Connor, Newsweek.
Yeah.
I'd like
I'm
to-
a loyal-
we've been in touch actually once
Yeah,
before.
I'm
yeah.
subscriber.
Thank you very much. I know we've mostly talked about China when it comes to Japanese national security threats, but I wanted to ask a little bit about Russia and North Korea's growing alignment too. I know, of course, that's also a very complex relationship, but we've seen growing, at least according to U.S. intelligence reports, of North Korea supplying Russia and potentially Russia reciprocating that in some form when it comes to tactical weapons for North Korea. Given both these countries also have a relationship with China, of course, as we just discussed, is that also a concern to Japan's national security and informing the debate going on in Japan about that?
Yeah, partially, yes. We all agree to drive nuclear. Japan and Japan, right? But if we feel off this non-proliferation page, we go down to geopolitical reality. Yeah, China does not want to defeat Korea. As far as North Korea has nuclear weapons, we can't help them. That means North Korea stays in the orbit of China. What's wrong with it? China thinks in this way. Russia has lost completely influence over North Korea, but they don't have nuclear. They have weapons. And North Korea want money. Absolutely, they want money, but they can sell weapons. Only that. It's all the fashion weapons, but it helps still in Ukraine. I'm not surprised when they sell Russia. Russia has money. We could not stop their oil selling simply because that will make oil markets volatile. So we have to let Indians buy oil with some discount spending. So that's money. They have to buy some weapons. And the Russia cannot catch up with us with the extended countries. They cannot produce it. That means they have to fight 19th century war. If they want to buy weapons, they can't do anything. They can't do much. They can produce Iranian drones. They can buy North Korea. But it should be going on. It's not good for us, but we can't stop it.
Read a question? Yeah. How solid is Quad? Given,
Sorry, but what?
given what
If you
you
said
just,
it, I can answer that.
what you just said about India's relationship with Moscow.
Yeah. So Indians is definitely coming towards us. India was with Russia when Washington, Tokyo was with Beijing. They were with Moscow, but they had to. They are non-alignment, but they had to buy good weapons. We didn't. Americans were so close to Pakistan, right? Indians were very much frustrated, so they went to Moscow to buy weapons. But now it's definitely different. Russia is in sharp decline. They're coming towards China. And China is growing bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a bigger threat to India. So India has to change their position. They come closer towards us. They want to cut 100% Russian relationship because they are non-alignment. They're not allied with us. They cannot expect our forces when they have fight against China. So they need Russians. Even though Russia is a very bad nation, they need Russians to face Chinese. But they are leaving Russia, coming towards us. We have to accelerate this process. This is what India is for us. And India is a democracy. China, we expected that they would be democracy one day, but they refuse to do so. To sustain this liberal order, our next hope is India. They can be here to sustain this liberal order. I'm telling this to all my American friends. Don't expect that India will be like Japan or Great Britain junior partner. India will be a super-sized France. Very noisy. But this is multipolar world we have to face. We need Indians. And the Indian cooperation with us is not, military. Just like China stood with us during the half of Cold War, we have with us China, but we have no military cooperation with Chinese. We expect India to take the same position. Stand with us, sustain the order, politically, strategically, but the closer military alliance are among allies only. That's Japan, Australia, hopefully. Korea.
So that, given that, there is another question, which Chris has already, some, it's raised, but maybe we'll go back to it. Given what you've just said, would you support or favor, or would the government of Japan favor a full-blown collective defense architecture?
I'm supportive of that idea. But for that purpose, there are several conditions there. China is not very big, but still, we don't have a common perception of threat of China. It's shared by Japan and Taiwan, Philippines, Australia. Korea is hesitating. Even though this is a threat, we don't face it. That's can be. We're facing North Koreans too busy. Don't involve us. That's still very much Korea. But young are changing in Korea, global Korea. They want to be engaged in global. Thailand, for example, it's an ally of the United States, right? But they don't see China as a threat. They're far away, they're okay, right? And so Myanmar is now being under heavy sanction by the West. They will not join us. So making a collective security system, it is not easy. If Canada becomes far bigger than today, everybody gets united. But with today's size of China, many do not want to be dominated by Chinese. As a common front against China. So we are now working on based upon American alliance system, Japan, US, Korea, the half population, US, Taiwan, Philippines, and Australians will come. We're asking the UK to join. This is workers. And asking India to stand with us. This is what we are doing. Going beyond. I want to do that, but it's not easy yet.
Okay, did I see a question over
question
here?
from her?
Yeah.
Years, I just what you think about that. Do you think it's very likely to happen? And if it happens, like Japan, US, do you think they will get involved in this, interfere this, and to what extent that will meet the country as well?
Yeah, it depends upon several elements. Xi Jinping's decision. We can't say I can't be Xi Jinping, so I can't speak for him, but he must think of many things, right? He is trapped by his own narrative. We said Russia took huge amount of territory from you. Look at Russia. They've come to Taiwan and Senkaku Islands. It's too tiny. But they made narrative, right? China was brought down by Westerners, Japanese. Now China's great. This great China was that's the reason why communists are in power. Last goal is Taiwan. And they are saying it's increasing this space, right? They can't go away from this. When they say we have to abandon Taiwan, and people say, why are you in power? So they have to be there. So this is one that's not quite all. Two, I have to say Taiwan identity is that gap. 10 years ago, Taiwanese are saying, well, I'm Chinese and Taiwanese. They're saying that 10 years ago, right? But in 2014, 2016, it's a sunflower revolution. Mind you, was bought by China. And massive communication started. 2 million Taiwanese were doing business in China, making huge amount of money. But the kids, Taiwanese kids, born after democratization, formed parliament. I said, we are Taiwanese, they said. That shocked Chinese very much. Chinese have great problem of identity issue with Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongolians, and Koreans. But Taiwan is much bigger than them. And they say, bye-bye, China. They can never accept it. So this Taiwan issue frustrates very much Beijing. Now China is big enough. They can start the war. If they want simple punishment, they can do it. they punish China, bombard, withdraw, they can do it. If they want to conquer Taiwan, it's very difficult. It's 200 kilometers. Taiwanese are 200,000 million army. To crash it, they are sending at least 400,000 army. It's not easy. It's strait is so wide. It's a huge Normandy amphibious operation, 10 times at the same time. This kind of, it's not easy at all. So if Xi Jinping wants to take over Taiwan, it's not easy at all. But if he wants some skirmish, some punishment, he can do it. So we have to show resilience. My thinking is, sorry for the Taiwanese, but we can't support their independence. It's too risky. They are entitled to do, but it's too risky. But we are committed to keep status quo. Enlarge their breathing space like WHO. We have to do that. It's a big nation. If Taiwan is implanted in Europe, it's a very big nation. It's bigger than Romania. True, Taiwan can be among G7 in Europe. So we have to help Taiwanese for that, but we cannot accept the coercive annexation of Taiwan by country like Beijing. We have shown that to them. Militarily, we're not enough, but we could resist. If Americans come in, we should go because they have bases in Japan, so we should go together. So if Americans go, we have to go, and we have to face Chinese forces bombardment. And if the other nations could help us, Australia, UK, France, Germany, very helpful. We have to mobilize all the West, and we have to mobilize economic sanctions against China. Hurts everybody, but it's not about money. If Japan must pay, say, $1 to $3 trillion for it, it's a war. Money is necessary. We have to compensate business support, but we have to do that. For money, we do not surrender Taiwan freedom. It's no transaction.
On that note, we're already a few minutes over. It's ended. I wish we had another minute to continue the discussion. Thank you all here and online for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.